for those of you buddies just coming in, drop in a chat what your favorite boba or bubble tea flavor is and what your favorite Trader Joe's snack is. And bonus, let us know what kind of designer you are and what industry are you working in or interested to work in. Awesome. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Designing at Early Stage Startups with our wonderful mentors and buddies, Hanna, Minjun, and Brian. I'm going to give a quick overview of what Design Buddies is in case y'all are new. I recognize so many familiar faces in here, so I'm really happy to see y'all. But yeah, we're a really big, wholesome community where designers, no matter what background you're from, can connect and receive a lot of wonderful resources. We've actually done probably close to 80 events like this. So we have a lot of wonderful events that y'all can partake in all for free. And yeah, feel free to connect with us on any of our social media platforms as well. And just some house rules to kind of set expectations for everyone. Events are recorded, and by attending, you grant consent. If you would not like to be anywhere in the recording, you're welcome to join us on our YouTube channel. You can just search Design Buddies and join there from there. And feel free to engage via chat. If any of our wonderful speakers say something you resonate with, you're welcome to comment on it, chat with each other in the chat as well. Additionally, we'll later have a networking sheet shared in the chat where y'all can connect with fellow buddies, and just you can send each other a personalized LinkedIn invite saying that y'all met at this event. We really encourage y'all to kind of build community amongst yourself as well. And during this event, I've gathered a lot of questions that you have all submitted on Luma, but we also want to prioritize the questions that y'all submit live. So we have a Slido link, so y'all can continue conversing in the chat, and we'll have all the questions on Slido where you can upvote each other's questions as well. And towards the end, we like to take a lot of group photos, and you're also welcome to share any takeaways, take any Instagram stories for your social media, tag Design Buddies, where we share it, and definitely feel free to join our Discord, continue conversation, and just have fun and be respectful. So with that, we'll hand it off to our speakers. So to introduce, we're gonna do, the question we have for everyone is, how did you get into design and how did you get to where you are now, and maybe some fun facts for yourself. We're gonna do popcorn style. I'll start with the order I see on Zoom. So we're going with Hanna first.
Hi everyone, I'm Hanna. I started in design from Neopets. I got really into it when I was in middle school, really loved designing the pet pages and guild stuff. And then it kind of just spiraled from there. I knew I wanted to become a designer. So I went to school for design. I had some internships, one of which was a early stage startup. And then I had a lot of startup experiences. So I was the first hire at a early stage startup called Locket. Then I was a designer at another startup called Tango, started my own startup, and was at Gfycat, another startup, as lead designer for 4 years. And now I'm currently in big tech. So that's me. And I guess I'll popcorn it over to Brian.
Sure. Just a little caveat. My son's in the background there. So if you hear lots of gargling and weird noises, that's him. His name's Damien. He's a cutie. He's 2.5. But yeah, hi, everybody. I'm Brian. I am a director of product design currently at a place called Lunchbox. They're based out of New York City, but I am also from Toronto. I saw a lot of fellow Torontonians, so shout out to y'all. It's a fully remote company. That's why I can do that. Otherwise, my journey into design started with actually designing a lot of graphic tees in school, playing with Photoshop 3 back in the day, before going to art school, design school, jumping into advertising, working my way up to art director. That was about eight years. And then went through the startup scene from mobile gaming, fintech, health tech, and now food tech. So that's 3 startups back to back to back. So it's been one hell of a ride. Happy to be here. And of course, last but not least, Minjun, it's all yours.
Hi everyone, my name is Minjun. So I I learned about like the major UX design when I was in high school, but I didn't know how I can get into UX design field. So I was doing a lot of design work. Same here for as Brian did. Like I do a lot of editorial design on Photoshop and Illustrator, and trying to like prepare my portfolio for this HCI like master programs. So I finally using what I did in like visual design, graphic design. Class, elective class as a become a portfolio. So I apply a couple like CS school in the US. So I got an admission from UW, University of Washington, Seattle. So I study HCI at UW, and after graduation, I land a job. I actually work on a few like early stage start company before I jump into the large tech company. Yeah, so that is my story.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing, everyone. I see a lot of buddies also started Photoshop. I did as well, and I also started with Neopets. So shout out to Neopets. Comment Neopets in the chat if y'all also played Neopets before, ever like learned how to like do HTML and CSS. I feel like that is something that I used to do as an elementary school student. Yeah, and so we're going to jump into some of the questions that y'all submitted. And so in general, the first question is, what are the main differences between working for a startup versus working at a large company in terms of impact and work-life balance? As we have a lot of buddies kind of curious of like what size company is for them. So if Minjun can also provide some insight on this, that'll be great.
Yeah, so based on my personal experience, I think for the work-life balance, it really depends on the team or depends on your personal choice. So there's no huge difference for me to like working with like large tech or startup in terms of my work-life balance. However, I do see the difference for the impact of your work, especially for the large tech company, like everything like you need to ship will have a large impact on the customer, especially if you are working on some B2C side of the products, and which means that every time before you ship this product, you have to get a lot of alignment with like different stakeholders, like different PM, higher leaderships, as well as like work closely with the team, maybe it's outside your organization. So a lot of collaboration to make sure that you get alignment before we ship either just a small stuff for the products. So yeah, so that is my personal experience.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. As someone also working for a huge company, there's always so many alignments, so many decisions, so many people have to like align on things in order for a step to go. Yeah, we're gonna go with our next question, which is, how early was the startup when you joined? Did the company have any funding yet? Because I know a lot of people, they're like, especially I feel like in my personal experience, there's a lot of like students starting startups, but they don't have funding yet. And there's some people, they work full time. So I'm just curious, the question was, how early was the startup when you joined, and did the company have funding yet? And we're gonna go with Hannah.
So I've been at a few startups. I think the earliest one I was at was the one I created, and we did not have any funding at all because I just quit my job and was like, let's start this thing. So luckily I've had saved money from my previous job, so I had something that I could actually depend on, as well as freelance, in order to actually get some money to pay the bills. So that was the earliest. So know that there was no funding there. We just kind of tried to do our own thing and launch something, and that was super fun. For other ones, one was also pre-seed. They had some angel funding, but was getting their seed funding. So that was my second earliest, I think. And it was also very, very early. I was technically their first hire. So they had a contractor before who was a designer who left. And then there was a intern as well, but that was also super early on. But that was a lot of fun, a lot of impacts, and being able to kind of, I guess, do a lot before getting that seed funding. But it was also kind of scary because you don't know where it's going to be in the next few months even. So it could have failed and I could have just lost my job. So that was also a little bit scary.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. Just a follow-up question. How did you know when it was like the right time for you to like jump on, like kind of quit your job and start your startup? Like, did you have like after you like validated your idea, or just for buddies like interested in potentially doing the same thing?
I actually, two people approached me. They were developers. One was more front end, one was more back end, and they had already had an idea, and they actually already had built out some parts of it. So they had coded and created parts of it that I could see, and I was in a place where I'm like, well, that sounds like fun. There's not a lot of opportunities to just kind of start something from scratch, and so I guess I just took the plunge and decided to why not try. My goal there wasn't really to make a successful business. I think it was more I wanted to launch something. So we did launch an iOS app and an Android app, and that was really fun. But that was kind of the goal, is just launch something and kind of working with someone.
Yeah, that's awesome. That sounds like really fun. I feel like definitely learn a lot. Like I definitely learned a lot from design buddies. It feels like a bit like that in some ways as well. Yeah, and I see some questions in the chat. Please keep all the questions on Slido, so you can try to. We don't want to like miss any questions, so feel free to submit a question on Slido and upvote your buddies' questions as well. And so we're gonna go with our next question, which is also if we're just going with the speakers who like mark them down. So if any of our speakers wants to add anything, feel free to just like jump in as well. And the next question is, were you ever the first designer on your team? If so, how did you navigate your career growth? We go with Brian.
Yeah. So in a previous startup, I worked as the founding designer slash UX lead, I guess, being the only one there, and really just setting the stage for I guess the foundational elements of like how we were going to approach working through some of the early business problems. This was post Series A, so literally like a month after they raised some funding. So they were just starting to build a team around product. One of the things that really helped me was I think what many of folks here are doing is to reach outside of the company walls and actually seek out mentorship and seek out advice from people in tangential spaces, if that makes sense. So the company I worked for, the startup that I worked for, was a health tech startup. So I talked to a lot of, thankfully I was in a building with other startups, so I could actually solicit help from other teams that were maybe a little bit more mature, or were also in the similar space, and just kind of shoot the shit a little bit, right? And just learn a little bit about what worked for them in their early days. And that's really important, is to find that camaraderie outside, so you don't feel like you're alone and it's you versus sort of all the business problems that the business is trying to lay on top of you. So finding that help is really important.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. And there's always like this online community where you can leverage as well for additional help if you feel like kind of alone as a designer on your team. Yeah, we're gonna go with Hanna next.
And also leverage your team as well. So the product managers, the developers, the engineers, the business development people, all of them are super, super helpful in terms of growth as well, especially if you might be like early in your career. Some of the people who like the CEO or some of the co-founders might have been doing it for a while, so they're great people to leverage as well. I think sometimes designers go into a company thinking that these people are against you, like they are telling you, no, we can't do this, no, it's not in, like we have to put this on hold and launch it later, we need to get it out faster. But I think going in, instead of thinking that they're against you, that they're a partner, is a better way to approach it. And you can learn and grow that way. I found a really great mentor who was a salesperson, and she's been in the industry for a long time, and she really helps me grow and kind of take my career to the next step.
Yeah, I like that. Like design, like mentors they're not limited to being designers. You can also learn from like all different disciplines as well, which kind of leads to our follow-up question from the chat. So this is submitted by Anonymous. Is a lot of things are changing. A lot of things change rapidly in early stage startups, especially since you're constantly iterating every day. How do you avoid design debt, or how do you deal with situations where like maybe like leadership were like, let's just skip research or like sacrifice a feature that is like that is like essential to the user experience? Like, how would you like advocate for design in these like fast-paced environments? And anyone can jump in.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question, and it's a common scenario across all early stage startups, especially when design is still new as a team. Even at my current org today, we are 200 plus people, and the product team is maybe formally 6 to 7 months old, right? Like we had raised Series A earlier this year, grew super fast. And so we're experiencing a lot of that debt that has accumulated over the first 2 years of its life, the company's life, pre-seed. And I would say one of the things that, it's important to also have some level of senior leadership as well. So building those allies as early as possible is just by listening, by understanding what their challenges are is really important. One thing you'll hear me often say is, it's kind of what Hannah was alluding to as well, is you have a lot of support within your team, within the company. So it's really important to try to solve for their challenges as much as for the users. And demonstrating your impact as a designer to your internal stakeholders and your internal team and what you can do for them. Even if you're a junior, that doesn't preclude you from jumping in and calling things out and pointing things out. They appreciate that. Startups, certainly the ones I've worked for, are really sort of understanding of folks pointing things out and they know they're trying to make things better. So never feel like your voice is not a valid or it's not valuable, regardless of your seniority. That's really important. I guess all this to say, in order to make yourself heard and advocate for design, you do have to make peace with the fact that you're going to have to compromise. You're not going to be able to follow through on a design process that you may have been traditionally taught, whether it's a boot camp or in design school. So knowing what is valuable and asking a lot of questions of your team, people who have either been there for a while or who own other parts of the product development process, like your product manager or your engine or your technical owner, so that you can come to a decision when you're actually producing the solution that you end up with. And look, sorry, research folks, sometimes you do actually have to skip it. That's just, sometimes the hypothesis is good enough for you to go on your gut instinct, so you can just test something quickly. That's just the reality of the startup life, especially in early stage startup when you don't have a lot of money for research. So you can still try to do some preliminary secondary research or guerrilla research, but beyond that, beyond maybe a week's worth, you're not going to go beyond that very often at this stage.
And you have to remember that everyone at that startup wants it to succeed. Like they desperately all want it to succeed at a very early stage startup. So they are on your side. They're like, everyone wants it to succeed and wants it to actually make an impact and out there. I think taking into like you might not be able to do a lot of research in the beginning, like just write a ton of notes and be like, hey, what do we want to learn? What do we want to find out? Once we launch this, like what kind of impact or like there's something there that you want to learn once you launch. So that thinking about that is very, very important because it can help drive you to the next step. So if something occurred and you had to launch it very, very fast and you didn't get all the research you wanted, like see what happened. And then that will kind of guide you into what you might want to do next. But know that sometimes what you launch might suck, but that's okay. Like that's just how things go.
Yeah, and sort of like just the last thing to touch on that point about taking notes. Track those trade-offs. What are those trade-offs that are being made from a UX, from a design standpoint, so that you can always go back and look at what those trade-offs were, and you can bring it back to the forefront when at the right time is available.
Yeah, I love that. I also love how you emphasized how just because like someone might be like an intern or a junior designer doesn't mean like you can still give recommendations and advice. Like it's people like look to designers for like design advice as well. And also knowing like keep track of like what to learn and just basically seeing everything as like a learning experience, like grow and iterate from as well. Yeah, so we have a lot of questions. I'm going to try to get through as many as we can. Thank you all for being super engaging in the question section. And this is another interesting question is, how would you describe the growth and learning someone might experience at an early stage startup versus at a more established company? Like maybe you could share some of your experiences of how it was like kind of growing your career, or like what different things y'all learned if from like working at a startup versus like a large company. And anyone can jump in.
So I think, so I'm going to take it, if you were early on at a early stage startup, a lot of learning is going to be trial by fire. So you're going to try things, some things will work, some things won't work. The best is if there was a senior designer on the team with you that can help guide you, help mentor you. That's not always going to happen at early stage startups. If that doesn't happen, then you just kind of just try, just do things. Some things will work, some things won't work. And I think the beauty of a startup is people know this. Like they know that startups don't work all the time. They're trying things and they're trying things really fast. So that's, I think, a big plus about a early stage startup early on in your career, because you can just try a lot of stuff and you have a lot more impact too. I think like you're able to maybe ship a really big product, even if you are just straight out of school. While at a bigger company, you might get a small section of something. You get a lot more mentorship, you get a lot more people to guide you, but you're not going to be trusted yet with a huge, big project that's going to be like very impactful for your org, because there are other designers there that can kind of take that on. They definitely will help guide you, and you'll probably be brought on to the project to do certain things, but you might not be the lead designer there. So I guess that's a trade-off, is when you get that mentorship, you get that guide. Another is you're just going to try things, and that's okay. Like just try things. And I think both are valid and valuable.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. Oh, Minjun, did you want to go?
Yeah, I totally agree with Hannah, because if you are a junior designer at a large tech company, you have more chance to, sorry, my cat is like jumping around my desk. So you have more chance to like get the mentorship. And we always have this kind of internal mentorship platform where you can connect with like the designer, like outside your team, and looking for the senior designer as your mentor. I feel like this kind of mentorship is very valuable for the junior designer who are just out of the school. Yeah, and the second thing I'm seeing that from the growth side, especially for the junior designer working at an early stage startup, you have to know about, you have to set up the career goal on your own, and knowing about that how you can accomplish this goal with internal and external resource. For example, like what we mentioned earlier, if you don't find any design mentor on your own company because you are the only one designer, you can reach out to the designer, looking for a designer outside your company, searching on the LinkedIn or other platform. And yeah, and just trying to figure out like how you can leverage the existing resource, and think about like what is your next job opportunity look like, and doing the same for your next job opportunity in your current like startup. Also, like this kind of mindset works if you are working on a larger company. Always think about like what you want to be next, and doing the work right now for your next job opportunity. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks y'all for sharing. And I feel like kind of piggybacking on that, just looking at the job, a lot of companies in their intranet, they have like a job family ladder. So just looking at where you want to be and doing some doing some projects like relating to that field is a way to kind of grow your career as well. And yeah, we're going to kind of circle back into joining a startup. So the second most upvoted question was, what are some red or green flags on evaluating whether or not to join a startup? Or maybe I can kind of rephrase it as, like red flags, like in the job description, be like fast-paced, unicorn, those kind of buzzwords they keep trying.
Look, I mean, I'm gonna be honest. I mean, like all of those buzzwords and everything, like it's not that they're fine. It's just what people write. Like it's just because they're not being dishonest, because it is fast paced and you are going to get a lot of ownership and you are 100%. It's all true. But I think one thing to remember, and it was touched upon by the other panelists here, is that you at an early stage startup, the experience is what you make of it. So how much initiative you decide to take, how involved you decide to put yourself in, it literally is throwing yourself into fire sometimes. One of the mantras here at Lunchbox that we kind of quote unquote live by across the company is running towards the fire with urgency, because we all understand that's where we are at as a company. So to see things like fast pace and all that, like, yeah, I get it. Like it can be a little bit of a turn off based on a lot of what's being written out there about these types of words, but it's also not being dishonest. So it is what it is that you make of it. But to answer the question though, in terms of red flags, if they are only willing to pay you with equity and they're promising you, that there's going to be some really great things that are happening with this equity, take that with a grain of salt. Equity is not worth anything until it is. So what that means is until the startup actually becomes something meaningful to the rest of the world, it's worth zilch. So you're working for free. Don't do that.
Yeah, 100% agree. Count equity as 0. Like if it's an early stage startup, 0. Like don't trust in it at all. Like even if you think it's the best idea ever, just treat it as 0, focus more on kind of the base salary. And it's fine if it's a little bit less than what you might be making at a bigger tech company, if you value that experience and if you really, really believe the company. And I think the green flag is, if you join an early stage startup, you better really believe in that company. Like you want it to succeed, and it is something that you think will succeed and be awesome. And that is why you're joining. And so, I mean, not every one of us can have the choice between multiple offers, of course. But if you are joining an early stage startup, I think the green flag is definitely like, this is a cool idea and you want it to succeed and you want it to be awesome and you really like it.
Yeah, definitely. Like that's like important, because I feel like a lot of, especially me when I was younger, like I was approached by startup. I actually worked part-time as a college student. I don't y'all can probably relate, but I was like, oh, you'll get equity. And I was like, oh, sure, I'll work for free. I'll contribute all those for free. It's so easy, but just remember, like equity is 0 until the startup IPOs. So yeah, just keep that in mind. It's I feel like, especially for me as like someone who was younger before, I was like, oh, whoa, cool, equity, and yeah, it really means nothing. So yeah.
Honestly,
like stocks. Yeah.
If you really think about it, just the amount of effort and work, it's going to be a lot of trade-off, and it probably won't be worth anything, even if it is very successful for at least like 4 years or quite a few years down the line. So it's going to be a ton of work for a long time. So that's something to keep in mind. I've got a red flag, since we didn't really talk too much about red flags. If they want you to sign an NDA, if they're like really, really protective of their idea, that is sometimes a red flag, because I feel like for a lot of startups, the idea isn't important, it's the execution. And if they aren't willing to share it, that means they're not getting feedback, they're not getting thoughts from people. And I think that part is really, really important. And that might be kind of a red flag, in the sense of the startup might be run by someone who isn't as experienced at running startups.
Yeah, look, like I've been around the block for 20 years, and one of my old mentors, he's one of the things that he said always stuck with me, and that is every problem has been solved. And it really does come down to execution. There is no such thing as a unique idea. Someone out there has also had that idea. So when it's same with equity. Ideas are meaningless until they become something. So if they're just protective about the idea and they don't want you to share the idea, and because the idea is super precious to them, I 100% agree with Hanna. It's not. Everything has been solved. Just how well can you iterate on it? That's innovation.
Yeah, I love that. I never thought of it that way. Like ideas are cheap, but like the execution is the one that matters. And if people are super protective, that means they're not getting feedback. I was like, wow, I never thought of it that way. But yeah, definitely red flag if people are like super protective buddies. Yeah, and we're gonna go to our next upvoted question, which is, what are the biggest disclaimers you give to anyone pursuing an early stage startup if they never worked at anyone before? Or maybe I can rephrase it to say, like, is there something that like surprised you when you started working at a startup that you didn't expect before? Maybe we could.
I can, yeah, I can say first, for me, like, I'm super surprised that we don't have any product manager on the team, and my CEO was my product manager at the same time, and I didn't have the design manager either. So my CEO is also my manager, kind of manager either, and we are on the same age, because one of the early stage that I've been working with, the CEO was dropped out of college, so he was much younger than me actually. So it's kind of like, I don't know about how I can navigate the conversation and he didn't have no idea about what he can help me to grow during our weekly like one-on-one. And the second is like, because the CEO is busy with everything, so it's hard for him to join every like design review. And also we don't have some established design review, this kind of mechanism as well. So it's hard for he to always like jump in and share some like feedback on new design work. And it's very difficult to get alignment and also be exposure to what we expect and what is the vision of the roadmap look like, because everything is just pretty messy for me, and I didn't know about how to navigate and how to talk to people and how to present my design. So yeah, I think like this thing become better after we have one design manager join the team. So lots of time I feel like I have more like career growth under my design manager. Yeah, so that is what I want to share.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, is that they are kind of messy. I'm not sure if it's a surprise or disclaimer, but things might pivot very fast and quick. So you might actually be working on a design and a solution, and then your CEO comes and is like, oh, I just talked to our VC and we decided we're going to completely do something else. And now all that you've done is just going to be kind of thrown out. Not exactly thrown out, because it's still helpful. Like you can still learn from what you've done there, but like that kind of happened a lot. And I think that happens a lot at really early stage, like pre-seed, seed stage startups, because you're not really sure exactly where you're going to go. You're mainly focused on like finding good market fit. You're mainly focused on growing your users, and it's going to change a lot. And like the company I was at, one of my first ones, the idea completely changed like partway through when I was there. So I joined the company, it was one idea. Later on, it completely changed, a completely different idea. So that will happen sometimes. And it's just kind of trying to finding that fit, trying to find that market. And you have to be willing to have your designs and ideas just kind of be like, nope, we're going to do something else. And it's not your fault. It's just how things kind of just roll.
Yeah, 100%. And sort of to follow on that, despite joining, I know a lot of us are in tech or planning to be in tech, but when you're joining early stage startup, there's actually very little of that. It's very service oriented. It's very manual. So you have ops people, CS people, customer success people, customer support people being Wizard of Oz behind the curtain, pulling lots of levers to make it seem like to the customer that you have a product that is doing the job. While the designer and the rest of R&D, the rest of product and engineering are scrambling all the time to play catch up oftentimes. But I make it sound bad, but that's actually where you do all the learning, right? That's as a team, as a company, that's where you, to Hannah's point about product market fit, and that's where you start to identify who your ideal customer profiles are, who is biting, who isn't, where you should focus your attention on, how to make compromises. You learn all of that very rapidly because you have to in order to survive. It's a survival mechanism. So that's a disclaimer I will say. It's largely manual, very little automatic, if any.
Yeah, and sales and business development, they might say things that you are capable of that you are not super capable of. I think one of them, they talked about our large like design curation team. That was me. That was me. I was the one designer there working on it all. But they will say, and they will try to sell things because that's how they know if, you know, people want it. So if someone's like, oh, that seems cool, then you better try and build it as fast as possible.
Yeah, it's so interesting how things can move so fast, but also the idea could get shut down so quickly. So it is really speed and you learn by surviving. So, and then it's like so many like pros and cons with like startups where you just like learn from like everything. And then versus like large companies, you might have like a stable or like a really more clearly defined career path. So definitely a lot of trade-offs, a lot of pros and cons for both. There's an interesting question, or a really great question submitted by RJ in the chat, which is, how do you combat imposter syndrome when you come into a startup where they expect you're competent at an aspect of a job, but you're really unsure and afraid to admit it?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think even myself as a senior in this industry, I encounter new information all the time that changes how I work or challenges my preconceived notions of how to do things. And that triggers that kind of imposter syndrome. So just RJ, for you out there, hello, director of product design, still get it. I still get this imposter syndrome. You're not alone. I think everyone here can relate to it to some degree, some level. So don't feel like you are alone here. To combat it, I think one of the things that had really helped me, and it's not really, I'm not going to offer like a magical bullet here to solve imposter syndrome, but one of the things that really helped me was to treat design as a job. It is not this fancy falutin thing, this magical thing that, we're not magicians, right? Practicing design on the job is a job. It should not be treated as this precious thing that you're trying to protect or push forward as this silver bullet to solve the business problems out there. It is not all on you. You have a team. You have people there. You have other subject matter experts to lean on. You are never alone in trying to execute on whatever the ask is. Never feel like you have to go away on your own as the sole designer and do something. You have a team, so make sure you open yourself to those possibilities all the time.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. I feel like I also deal with imposter syndrome. Like I still feel like I used to feel like a small potato in this big world of design. I don't know if y'all can relate, but just focusing on like you're all like your team you all have the same goal of succeeding. So I like that. Yeah, so we're gonna kind of segue back into some of our submitted questions on Luma. And this is more about like the process in the startup, but the question is, what are some projects that you've worked on and shipped at early stage startup, and how is the process like, and did you also get to make most of the design and product decisions? So without violating any NDAs, maybe y'all can share a story of how you came from a product from like idea to launch. We can go with Hanna.
Okay, so there's been a few of them. I think the good thing is usually the startups that I've been at were like they kind of already had an idea already of a direction that they want to go to, and it's just kind of executing and trying different things. It was very messy, I think, for most of it. A lot of it is like the CEO might come and be like, hey, let's try to do this. Let's try to let's try to like make a messaging app or something, and then you have to go, okay, let me try to sketch some stuff down, let me kind of try to do some research on like what the current market is, and just kind of try things, designing, wireframing, things like that. You might be able to get a little bit of research in terms of like reaching out to past users, reaching out to like going on the street and be like, hey, can you try to test something? But I think for most of it, it was very messy. We just kind of was like, let's just try it, because our development team was very, very fast at delivering something. So they can deliver something within weeks if it's a small product. So that's what we did. Instead of actually testing, we just kind of took what we had designed, had them kind of created, and then we shipped it. Sometimes we got not great feedback. So sometimes they would tweet at my CEO and be like, this sucks. So then we're like, well, why does it suck? And we kind of went back and changed it and redesigned it. I think for that particular thing I was thinking of, we rolled it back immediately and then redesigned it that weekend and then kind of launched something on Monday. So I think that's some early stage startup stuff. Just kind of trying things and trying to get it out there.
Yeah, no, I that's pretty much it in a nutshell. It really is trying a lot of stuff and seeing what works and what doesn't and iterating. I know that's a very cliche answer, but as someone who's part of the senior management side of things, to offer a slightly different side of this answer, one of the things that I am tasked to do is to question things that leadership brings forward. Either the CEO had an epiphany in the shower this morning because they saw something in New York Times that said a competitor, or this is actually, here, let me give you not a real example, but an example that could have happened in a parallel universe. So right now, New York is cracking down on a bunch of on delivery, food delivery services like the Uber Eats and the DoorDashes and all that. They're doing a great deal of damage to the food economy and everything. So New York is trying to rein it in. So lots of news sources. Now, our CEO could have seen that as an opportunity and just like really ramp hard on focusing on last mile delivery, right? And start releasing features and all that. So if that were to happen, my role in that would be like, okay, cool. So if we decide to do that, are we going to drop all of this other stuff? And if the answer is yes, then you have to tell me, CEO of this company that I'm a part of, how, like, what is the justification for that? Show me like actual objective reasoning, right? So as a senior leader, that's my job, to question those things and to protect the team. So when there are, to Minjun's point earlier about like having a design manager or other managerial roles being filled, that's where you'll start to see early stage startups start to shift a little bit into something that's a little bit more mature. And you're starting to, identify what is the thing that should be focused on. And then you actually have a roadmap at some point. That's a holy grail artifact, by the way, for early stage artifacts, when you can actually get to a roadmap point. You're on the right track.
Priority setting is pretty important, and it's a skill that you kind of need to kind of learn just in design. Even as a IC at a big company, you would have to be like, well, if I am going to work on this, it's going to delay these. Is that okay? And be able to kind of have that conversation with different people. So that setting is very, very important in an early stage startup, is be able to decide what is priority, what isn't. Be able to navigate that and be able to talk to the CEO and be like, that sounds, why? And be able to kind of have that conversation.
Yeah, question the CEO until it all makes sense. Just keep asking questions. Question the CEO, please.
If I had a dollar for the number of times I've went off on my CEOs, I would have at least $20. So
nice.
It happens.
Yeah, if Brian can do it, so can you, buddies. Question your CEO if things don't make sense. A lot of times, yeah, like just because CEO saw something on New York Times and they pivot, that's like, you should, like, that you should definitely ask questions about that. We have about 12 minutes left, so we're gonna do a lightning round. So for these lightning round questions, I'm gonna try to go through as many questions as possible. And for our panelists, feel free to just give like really short answers, and not everyone has to answer them all. I guess a kind of like interesting question is, how do you know when it's time to exit a startup?
When you stop learning.
Love that.
100%. Yeah. When you're not getting anything out of it and you're putting more into it.
Yeah, love that. When I feel like I have friends who always also like say that sometimes startups like work them to death and not paying enough. So I guess that as well. Another question is, I'm currently a junior designer at a small company, 30 plus people. What are some type of skills you would expect someone to grow into becoming a senior or lead designer? It could be skills like problem solving, skills like being able to product manage, or anything that y'all think that fits this. I'll drop in the chat as well.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the organization and what the needs are, but I would say generally, if for me, like again, like there was a talk I gave last year about self-awareness and sort of developing that skill set of understanding where you fit into the org, if that makes sense, even as a junior. Like, what are you contributing to? What are the problems that you're solving that you're actively making an impact on? Are you taking initiative as a junior, especially at an early stage startup, and looking for, again, like those fires and trying to pitch in where you can to solve it from, as a designer? It doesn't mean you are only focused on design things. So at an early stage startup, it's important for everyone, not just designers, to contribute in a way that kind of goes a little bit above and beyond what their job description is. And I would say, at an early stage startup, as someone who is a manager or something like that, that's one of those key traits that we would look for in a designer, is if they can flex their problem solving abilities beyond just execution. So obviously that's your day job as a junior, is you're going to be executing a lot of things. But if you also are able to say like, hey, I think we could do this thing better, or I think I can make some optimizations here in this process, or how I produce Figma, handoffs, by annotating just a little bit more for the devs here, because they seem like they're not getting this part, or they're missing it. Just like calling these things out is really good as a starting point for a junior.
I also like Kenny's message in chat, which is knowing what hill to die on and when to fight. I think that's very important. Like we talked about fighting the CEO, but you don't want to fight the CEO on everything. You want to make sure it is important enough. It's not a small, tiny, whatever project that impacts no one. So I think that's also important.
Awesome. Thank you all for sharing. We're going to choose another popular question submitted by RP, which is, considering how messy, unpredictable, and unstructured design at a startup can be, how do you personally know when you're successful aside from KPIs or OKRs?
Well, I mean, if there's hopefully the startup will have some semblance of tracking, even something as basic as Google Analytics. I mean, you would still be able to at least see some uptick in adoption, in listening to how like other teams are going to be presenting things back to you, the product team, in the wins that they've established over the course of X weeks. Your metrics are really going to be reliant on your cross-functional teams. The amount of tickets that are being generated on customers support, the amount of problems they're solving. Are they increasing headcount because they just can't deal with those fires? Like things like that are going to be more sort of qualitative measures of how kind of you're doing as a business, as a product team over time. So just kind of paying attention to these things. Nothing is going to be immediate. Like you're not going to be able to look at something a week from now and be like, we were successful, we were not. It's going to take a little bit more time than that, an iteration for sure, when you're still discovering who you are effectively as a business.
Yeah, I love that. And Kenny also asked, added in the chat, make sure you don't measure vanity metrics. I know it's easy to like fall into like the biggest number and just use that, but don't measure that as well. Yeah, I'm gonna try to speed. Yeah, we have like 7 minutes left, so we have a lot of great questions. And I'm gonna go to the next one is, for small teams with few or no product managers, what are some good practices designers should follow to help plan the roadmap or timeline?
Oof. I mean, first of all, kudos to even having a roadmap. I mean, I'd be really curious to know from this person, like, is that roadmap even being adhered to? Because chances, the answer is no. You know, it's just reality. I think in a situation like that, honestly, you really just take it on the chin. As funny, as bad as that sounds, like you are literally going to go be sprint over sprint. You're going to learn very quickly, move on to the next sprint, change things as you go when it's super early, when it's like pre-seed. That's just reality. I mean, Hanna and Minjun can, you know, chime in here also and say I'm full of shit or not, but yeah, that's my experience anyway.
Yeah, I think like we always have someone that they are just a CEO, but they are the product manager. They have some priority of for this quarter, like which you can working on. But maybe we might have some official like roadmaps on the team, but we always have some sort of priority to be working on. So make sure that you schedule this kind of weekly check-in with the team and share your design work with any stakeholder you are working with, maybe just the CEO, maybe they are the product manager.
Yeah, like as Pat also shared in the chat, sometimes the CEO or the CTO might be the product manager too. Yes, so we're gonna go through another question is, do you think the size of a company has impact on influencing the creativity of a designer?
I don't think so. I mean, I think creativity is like you can be creative even with a ton of constraints and at a big company. So I think it doesn't really have any impact on creativity. Maybe you're even more creative. I don't know. Like if there's so many constraints you can have to work within. So I don't think so.
Yeah, always it depends. Yeah, it's like one of your rants. Yeah. So the culture I feel has a bigger impact. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I feel like creativity, I feel like you can find it anywhere. Don't have to be at work even. It could be after work. So yeah. Next question is, I'm just trying to lump a few together that was submitted in Luma as well. I know some of y'all moved from like a startup to like a large tech company. So we were curious, like, what made you want to switch from a startup to work at a large company?
So for me, the honest answer here is I was laid off by the early stage startup company. So I have to find the job immediately. And and luckily, like during that time, one of the large company, like they're hiring the junior designer. So I was fortunate enough to get the offer and join the team. So I think like another thing like I want to say is for the if you are super worried about your job, like security, when you are working at the early stage startup company, trying to just save everything, like save your design documents, save your design file, just in case like the company lay off you, so you have the materials to find another job.
Mine was I just wanted some different learnings. So I was in startup world for 7 years before I went into big tech, and I've kind of already been in startup world for quite a while, led teams, and just wanted a different experience.
Yeah.
I went the other way, so I went from like big agency to small. So nothing to add.
What made you want to do that as well?
Well, it really goes back to something that was mentioned in the beginning. It was about impact and wanting to be involved in a great deal more things than what I was being given in the agency world. So, and learning is just being able to rapidly learn.
Yeah, All right, we're almost out of time, so we're gonna go with 2 more quick questions and then do a group photo. So we also have some Design Buddy Zoom backgrounds as well. We can share in the chat, but I'm going to take one question from the chat that's interesting. So Josh asked, how can you tell if the design is maturing and how you ensure that the team continues to mature at from the initial messiness of a startup?
Yeah, it's a really tough question because you know, a lot of it comes from delivering, like showing the impact of the team that the team is having on the business, and that can be challenging when everything is manual in an early stage startup. So the measure of that for me, it's not so much a metric, but as the company grows and hopefully manages to secure some funding so that they can do that effectively. But as they grow, you're going to start noticing more and more product roles being filled. You're going to notice more seats being filled with bums from not so much from the sales side or the ops side, because that stuff is still that stuff is on lock. Now it's time to recognize that in order to scale, things need to start becoming more automatic. And design has a very, very practical role to play, both on an operation side and on the product itself, on the actual user experience and the customer experience. So when you get to that sort of like critical moment, you'll notice that, and it's not going to happen like immediately, of course, but you will start to notice that there is a bit more process. There's a bit more that CEOs going to start to back off a little bit more as these product people are coming in to fill in that role, people who have expertise in the domains. So it really does come from the shoring up of the product team as a whole, which includes product design.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing. So we're going to go with our last question. Meanwhile, feel free to turn on your camera, get your Design Buddy Zoom background, because you'll do a group photo after this. And my favorite question to ask to end every design panel is, what is something you would tell your younger designer self, or any other pieces of advice that you want to share that didn't get the chance to share yet today?
I take more risks. That's it.
Mine is just everyone has valuable opinions and thoughts. No matter how junior they are, no matter if they are an engineer. I kind of see that sometimes where it's like, oh, I'm design, I know everything, but it's like everyone has valuable information to give, and it's just take everything into consideration.
For me, it's like really taking the time to hone your skill, hone your soft skill and hard skill. Yeah, and if you are coming from like the boot camps or design school, you still need to spend a lot of time like learning the foundation of like the UI or UX design for maybe the material design guideline or human interface guideline. So just really take the time to hone this specific skill set.
Yeah, thanks y'all for sharing. Definitely take my risk. Ask the what's the worst that can happen if you don't die. Then yeah, I always ask like, what's the worst case scenario? What's the best case scenario? What does all matter in 5 years or in 1 day or so? So
that's always that's always the dark joke in health tech, by the way, is that did anybody die today? No, we had a good day.
Yeah, with that, we're gonna do our group photo. So I'm gonna count down a few seconds. And yeah, thank you all for coming. And I am so happy to see our Design Buddies background. So I'm going to count down a few seconds. We're going to do a static group photo and then the Instagram wave for Instagram story. We like to spice things up at Design Buddies. So we tend to do that a lot, doing some group photos and some waves together. All right, I'm going to count down. Feel free to grab any object you want. I have a fluffle with me. If you have your own fluffles or you have your own stuffed animals, different random objects you want to grab on your desk that want to be in your photo, feel free to grab some as I count down. All right, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm going to take multiple and choose the best one where everyone looks the best in. You know how it's like, right? So we're gonna do that. Ready, set, say fluffle. Fluffle. All right, we're gonna do a wait for Instagram story. Oh my god, I love that Snorlax. I love the dog plushies as well. So awesome. Snorlax and Ditto. And yeah, I see some Pokemon. It's so amazing. I'm just making sure I'm logged into the right Instagram account. All right, I'm on Design Buddies now. We're gonna do a wave for Instagram stories. So ready, set, wave. You can dance, you can dab, you can do whatever you want. All right, ready, set, go. Hello, buddies. We just finished our wonderful panel about designing at early stage startups with our wonderful panelists, Hanna, Minjun, and Brian. And thank you all, buddies, for coming today. Make sure to check out our recording on our wonderful YouTube channel. All right, cool. That wraps up our event. I am going to stop streaming on YouTube, and I will see you at our next event tomorrow. Actually, we're gonna do a very wholesome Ask Me Anything session with Discord's art team. So Discord staff, our friendly Discord staff, will be on again for another event. So make sure to join us there. The details are on our Discord. So feel free to join Discord and hop into full fun. Hop into the join the wholesome fun and join the full fam. Let's some tongue twisters here today. But yeah, so bye YouTube buddies. And for the host, we're gonna do a quick breakout session for a very quick retrospective.